Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. It's so good to have many of you. We're about to launch our second part 2 of empowering admissions and, having David come up and really chat. So we're really excited to have all of you here. We are going to bring up David and Ro and Gabrielle will be driving us through this conversation. Most of this is going to be from part 1 a little bit. And so, I'd love to first, before we dive into David's stuff, Gabrielle, do you want to give the audience a little bit of what they should know about the platform, how they should engage with us and things like that?
Yes, I'd love to. So welcome. We're super excited to have you here. And in terms of participation, we would love to hear your thoughts, opinions, questions, whatever you may have. I already see the chat going. You should see a chat over on the right of your screen. Please feel free to go ahead and post a comment. I can actually, there are the comments coming up from Art. As you can see, I can bring up your comments. If you'd like to come up on stage, you can just drop a little note saying, hey, I'd like to come up. I will be able to invite you up to the stage. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to invite you up. So you have to you don't have the ability to ask to be invited up. So you have to let me know in the chat and then I can bring you up. But I don't want to put you on the spot. So that's really important. And yep, I think that basically covers everything. And of course, just let me know if you have any other questions. I'll be here.
All right. And so really, let's just get started, right? David, thank you for, that great part 1. For the folks that missed it, and we are going to give you a link of part 1. It is on our YouTube. This is streaming live onto YouTube, so you can come back to it at any point in time, share it with friends, come back if you feel there was a certain nugget. David, give us a little bit of recap for the folks that wasn't here in part 1. What did they miss, or what should they be thinking about as you start to thinking about using Excel in terms of validating engagement scoring?
Yeah, so last month we had a really fun discussion around the modern admission office, and then we had our first workshop where we were using Excel to not only build our engagement score, but we were actually automating the engagement score rubric to all of our records. So that's current records, that's new records as they were entering your system. So we were able to basically live understand how our student records, whether you're in the admission office, for your prospective students, current students, alumni, how they were engaging with your institution so that you could understand how to further. Oh, I think I might have popped off of the stream.
You're back up.
Okay. So no, we just had a really nice conversation around how to use Slate to build your engagement score, how to automate it. Today, we're going to be using Excel to actually build your scoring rubric. So you understand we should use these behaviors. We should give them this many points, and making sure we're validating it against our outcomes. And then next month, we're going to be talking about how to actually use this in your communications, in your training, and in your planning.
Yeah. So I'm going to, you said you have a lot to cover, right? So I'm going to let you do your thing. I'm going to bring up your presentation. You can lead the conversation. For the folks in the audience that are, if you have comments, go ahead and put them in there. We'll definitely be able to move it up and be able to have David answer some of that. If you are, if you like to jump on stage and have a conversation about it, or have a question that you'd like to address, we can certainly let you do it. Let us know in the comments, or if we invite you up, certainly, join us if we felt like, hey, that comment is requires a little bit more conversation. But this is really about a dialogue among all of us, but you're going to see a little bit of deep dive. This is something that I think we've heard from, is that not everyone dives deeper into the content, and that's what we really want to provide for you. A lot of times people are coming to webinars and we're trying to sell something. That's not what we're really doing here. So this is going to be a really deep dive, and we're hoping that you guys all will enjoy it. All right, David, I'll let you go.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'm going to drop a link in the chat. So we're going to be actually working in Excel to start building our engagement score. So you can have a blank Excel document, but we've already kind of prepped one for you with some test data and some examples of how to build everything. So if you want to hop to that webpage, and if you scroll down a little bit, there's going to be the download the Excel sheet. So feel free to do that while we're getting started. But hello, everyone. Welcome to the second Slate workshop powered by Beyond Academics. In this series, we're talking about engagement scoring and predictive modeling and how you can leverage Slate to run it and apply it to your records just in perpetuity. So I've presented on this in Slate, Summit, and AACRO, but like Matt was saying, a lot of times those are much more static, just the presenter talking at the audience. And these are going to be much more hands-on training sessions. So my name is David Dysart. I'm the Director of Data and Functional Systems Design here at Beyond Academics. And Beyond Academics is a preferred partner with Slate. We're serving as operating partners to institutions committed to and becoming and remaining future ready. In today's agenda, we're going to be still on the technical side. Like I said, next month, we're going to be talking about the more strategic piece on how to actually use engagement scoring in Slate. But today we're going to be doing some data exploration, scoring or actual behaviors like event attendance, emailing us, ping data, stuff like that. And then we're also going to be talking about balancing that score across your behaviors and then actually validating your new automated score against outcomes. And this could be staff evaluation. This could be if they applied, if they admitted. So we're following the same case study across the entire workshop series. So we're talking about an engagement score for an admission office. After we do the first 3 workshops on engagement scoring, we're actually going to do a very similar process for predictive modeling, like how likely students are to apply and enroll. But those will be coming later this year. And I believe we have also added the video for last month. So be sure to check on that. And that's the actual Slate part of this process. So that's configurable joins, it's automating through source formats and stuff like that. We're going to run for about an hour. This session will be recorded, so feel free to add your questions in the comments. We can bring you on stage for the conversation as well if you prefer. So because it is recorded, just make sure you're not sharing your screen with any live data or anything along those lines. So Excel is what we're going to cover mostly, but this is really being driven by your Slate data. It's able to passively track so many different engagements and behaviors that you're actually capturing in your relational database, customer relationship management system, whatever you want to call Slate, magical software, whatever it is. But the number of variables you have to use is going to increase as you're utilizing Slate more. So if you're using Slate to send emails or host events, or inbox so that the students are emailing you, or even if you have ping implemented and you're able to see how long students are on your website and certain pages. And what we're going to do today, and I'm going to show you kind of a preview of my document that I use for this project. It's a little bit more complicated than what we're going to build today. So just to show you some of the features though, last month we built our configurable joins query. We downloaded our data. So we're tracking like this person went to 3 events or this person sent us 2 emails. And then we're also going to be applying a scoring rubric. So how many points per behavior should they be getting? I personally like to cap the number of points a student can get. So if a student went to 4 events, they get 20 points. I don't care if someone went to 15 events to give them 5 points per event. They're going to get into some situations where people are trying to game your engagement score, or realistically, someone going to 15 events probably is not 15 times more engaged than someone going to 1 event. I also like applying a total maximum score. So maybe like they can score points out of 100. And again, this gives you better context when you're using the score than some like upper end. We don't know what a good engagement score is because they could score 1,000 points or 500 points. So being able to build in context into your engagement score is an important piece. Sorry, just looking at the chat. Yeah, so yeah, just trying to make sure that they're not gaming the system and just trying to make sure that it's a balanced scoring rubric across all of your behaviors. And you can even start scoring like sub behaviors, like these are event related engagements. This is communication based. So really more holistic manner.
Yeah. So
And,
David, it looks like this is a question that came up, and I apologize if you answer it. Your audio has been coming in and out a little bit. The question is from Paloma. Why cap the maximum number of points a student can get per behavior?
Yeah. So if we take an example of a student who maybe went to 2 on-campus events, they went to a tour and maybe an information session, that person, how are they substantially different than someone who went to 20 virtual events? And maybe the person's going to 20 virtual events because they heard you demonstrated interest. So if we're capping the number of events that a person can get points for, then we're not only removing people trying to game our engagement score, but we're also trying to see how is that person different when they go to 20 events versus 2 events. Is this an indicator that they are 20 times more engaged than a person who goes to 1 event, or 10 times more engaged than someone who goes to 2 events? Probably not. So it gives us more control to allow us to, can you all hear me okay? Hopefully.
We can hear you.
Okay. So that just gives us a little bit more control over how we're determining what is an engaged student, what does that look like. So there is a lot of trial and error to make sure that you're adequately representing what an engaged student is. Thanks, chat. And then just some additional kind of pieces, like even though our total maximum points, when you add all of this up, is 100 points, we're only seeing the highest observed score is an 84. Because if you are doing a scoring rubric of like, oh, they can go to 4 events, they can log into the portal 3 times, whatever it might be, it's probably, they're not going to do every single engagement behavior. But a lot of this document is going to be automated. So if I want to change, like, oh, I want to do a maximum of 2 behaviors instead, then it's actually going to update my entire document and saying now the maximum number of points they can get is 10. The maximum number of points they can get as a total score is 90. This behavior accounts for 11% of the total score. So there's going to be a lot of pieces that you can do in Excel. Like a lot of this you could replicate in Slate. It's going to take longer to build. It's going to take longer to refresh your reports. But this is just a more flexible and powerful way to do your data exploration in Excel.
Hey, David.
So,
yes. I'm having some back end comments about the audio cutting in and out. Can you try just turning off your video to see if that helps?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that, everybody. Hopefully that's a bit better on the audio side now. Okay. So I believe we're also going to email you that Excel document as well as it being in the chat. And again, that's just going to be easier to follow along. You'll have some test data to play around with. So we'll go ahead and pull up that Excel document now. So what we have here is 2 tabs. We're going to have a tab with our test data in it. And we have things like an ID variable, what year the student's entering, some validation variables. So like, what is the staff evaluating the student as? Did they apply? And a 1 is yes, 0 equals no, they didn't apply. If they were admitted. And then we have our actual behaviors that we downloaded from our configurable joins query in Slate last month. So this is how many events they attended, how many emails they sent us. If they submitted the FAFSA, again, a 1 equals yes, they submitted. 0 means they have not submitted it yet. So we're able to start building our actual scoring rubric right in this tab. So Excel has the ability to create formulas. And the easiest way to pull that up is if you just click on a cell and then you click on the equal sign. That tells Excel to, I want to write a formula or I want to reference a cell. It's some kind of dynamic content. So if I click F5 in that sample Excel document, it tells Excel, I want to show the text in F5 because we're applying a scoring rubric to it. I just want to know, okay, this is my event attendance. So I go to that first row of data. So K6, again, I'm going to hit that equal sign. And I want to take my behavior. In this case, this is 3. And in Excel, multiplication is just an asterisk. And then we're going to click on a new cell where we're going to put the number of points. And in this case, we'll do it in K4. And this allows us to say, I want to apply maybe 3 points for every event they attend, or I want to apply 5 points for every event they attend. And you're seeing that it's dynamically updating the amount of points this person is receiving.
Hey, David, do you see the question? David, do you see the question? Why do you do this in Excel and not in Slate?
Yeah, so a lot of this you could do in Slate with like configurable joins, independent subqueries in a really complex report that might take 45 seconds, a minute to actually load or refresh. So a lot of this you could do in Slate. It's a little bit faster to like update your points. It's faster to do these kind of tweaks. We're also going to run some very light statistics that Excel just has pre-programmed in its formula data bank that Slate's not going to be as easily able to replicate. So in my mind, I mean, I'm also I'm an Excel person, so it's a little bit faster for me. It's more flexible. It gives you more options to do your validation. So I definitely like doing Excel for this piece. So we're going to be dragging this formula around so we can also do the emails and the FAFSA and the rows. So one thing's going to help is if we tell Excel, I always want to reference row 4 because that's where my points are at. So if we add a $, which is just shift 4, now when we click on the cell and we drag that green box down, or we can copy and we can paste, it's always going to be referencing row 4 because we told it with this anchor of a $. I always want to look at that row, but it's allowing me to drag down these rows and still being able to accurately capture the cells that I want. And one other thing we can just do is kind of double left click that little green box in the bottom right corner. Excel is usually pretty good about going down as far as it thinks you need to. It doesn't always do that though, so it's good to just make sure you're capturing all the rows with your formula. So we're seeing this as someone has 5 events, 5 times 5 is 25, 0 times 5 is 0. So we're able to very quickly build this profile of our students. And same thing, we can kind of copy these cells and paste here. And because we're moving where the formula is, Excel knows like, oh, okay, you're moving your formula over a cell. Let's move your reference over a cell. Or same thing, we can again just hit that equal sign. We can click where we want. And it's just going to capture whatever is in these cells. And it's just helpful knowing like, this is the points version of event attendance. This is the behaviors. So maybe emails, probably not as strong of an indicator of engagement with your campus. Maybe we want to score 1 point for every email they send. And again, we can either manually write this formula, again, equal sign, reference the behavior, how many times the email does, multiply it with an asterisk, and just, again, select the number of points. It's important that we're going to also add that anchor so that Excel knows you want to continue multiplying what's in this column by specifically what's in that row. And again, when we click on the cell, we have that little green box at the bottom right. We can double click, left click that, and it's going to drag your formula already all the way down. And because Excel knows when we move the cell, we want to continue moving our references, we can actually just drag that formula over here, and we can copy it, Control C. We can click a cell, we can shift, left click a cell down there, and we can paste it. And Excel just knows like, okay, we're just making sure we're referencing the correct cells. So when we double click that cell, we can see it's 0 multiplied by blank. So FAFSA, that's a pretty good indicator of how much, like a good indicator of that someone is engaged with your institution. They're serious about their application or being a prospective student. So maybe we give them 10 points for submitting the FAFSA. So we've already established and built our rubric of how many points per behavior. Now we actually want to create what is the total engagement score that these students have. So we already have a column here in our sample Excel document. And we can just click that again, that first row of P6. We can hit that equal sign. And we can do the same thing where we are clicking a cell or using mathematical symbol like a plus sign. We can click that one. Or what Excel also has is they have a bank of formulas already. So if you start typing after that equal sign, the word sum, it knows like here's everything that we know how to do in Excel that has the SUM in it. And if you mouse over it, it says adds all numbers in a range of cells. So we can double click that sum. And now we can also just click on that range of behavior points. So that K6 : M6 just means it's going to add up all 3 of those cells per row. And if we click on this.
David, really quick, just so that this is the Excel element is really cool. When we think about the points on top, do you use some sort of strategy from previous years to give a point value for event attendance, email sent by? Like, is there a way for us to really look at the type of points that we're giving value to? Because maybe last year the FAFSA submission was a really good predictor. Do you use last year to create the point structure for this year, or do you more have a consistent way so that you could look over year or term over term?
Yeah, we definitely want to utilize our historical records to kind of build what does an engaged student look like. So here we're looking at like students from like 2021, 2022, 2023. And we're going to talk more next month as well about utilizing your staff counselors who have a lot of institutional knowledge. They're like, okay, we've been reading 1,000 apps a year for the last 5 years. They're going to have a lot of insight of what an engaged student looks like. How many emails students are sending, how many events are they attending, and being able to pair the data from your historical side with your staff, your admission counselors, or if you're on the student success side or the advancement side. There's a lot of institutional knowledge that we're going to talk about next month, and using like Slate forms and Deliver to really collaborate with them to understand your records. And when you're doing this more technical piece of looking at historical records to figure out what a good balance is, and we'll talk about validating these points later in this workshop. But you're going to get outliers. You're going to get weird situations where maybe the student looks super engaged, but they never applied, or the staff said, "Oh, this was not an engaged student." And being able to have those interviews with your admissions staff to understand, like, why did the student not succeed here? Why was this student not considered engaged? Maybe they had an 1.5-hour phone call where they just had a really combative, negative phone call with the staff. Or maybe they, again, had their computer just automatically log into 20 events and they just didn't actually care. They just wanted to show a fake demonstrated interest. So it's definitely going to be a pilot process your first year. You're going to look at your historical data. You're going to utilize your institutional knowledge from your staff members.
Could you go back historically and populate an Excel spreadsheet for historical terms so that you could then, determine the point strategy here? Like, is there a way to go back historically and look at the same type of scoring you're trying to map out here, but what did that look like, a year ago, 2 years ago, or even 4 years ago, because you want to then compare it to the graduation class that you're about to graduate. Like, who was these people that scored really well and is graduating now, right? Could we do something like that?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of that's going to depend on when your institution moved to Slate, if you added in pre-Slate records into Slate, but also have to account for like, oh, we started offering virtual events during the pandemic. So there's going to be years of our historical data set that we're trying to figure out what the engagement score is, but only some of them had the opportunity to go to virtual events, or only some of them had the opportunity to log into a portal. So there is going to be a lot of nuance when looking at historical data and understanding each year of data and how they engaged with your institution, what possible environmental factors. So again, the COVID-19 pandemic, FAFSA simplification, enrollment cliff. There's so much going on outside of your Slate data that it's going to require a lot of human knowledge to understand the context of these behaviors. But yeah, where last month we built the configurable joins. We used planned entry term categories to pull our previous historical records from Slate to actually populate this data set.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy getting data into Slate from your LMS, your SIS. So you're able to not only track behaviors that are offered through Slate, again, events, emails, pings, but you're also able to import data into Slate and then use that imported data to build your engagement scoring. I will say the last 3 workshops in this series is predictive modeling. So you also do have the actual mathematics behind the model to kind of help you understand, like, oh, events really drive enrollment, or emailing us really drives if the student applies or not. So you're able to kind of also rely on that, again, that third party of the model itself to help inform what events, what behaviors to include, and it'll actually build the weight or the score per event for you.
I see there's a question also from William. So how could you add Slate data with in-person engagement to better predict? Is this always manual, David? Are they always, is there a way to track the in-person activities in some way?
Yeah, William, if you want to hop up, I'd love to chat with you more about that. It depends on the type of in-person engagement. So if it's just like, oh, I want to know they came on campus and just walked around campus themselves, they didn't come to a guided self-tour, you could have a QR code on the wall of the admission office to, like, here, scan this QR code, fill out the form, we'll give you a walking map or a guided video to walk through campus. So again, you're adding value to their experience on campus, but then you're internally tracking it in Slate, like, okay, they came to campus. We know that they might not have scanned a QR code if we weren't giving them that value added in a guided walking tour. Hi, William. Was there anything in particular you were thinking about in-person engagements?
No. So a student walks in while they're at an in-person event, right? But they go and talk to a professor, or they're calling and talking to an advisor about a financial aid question to see if they need to change their FAFSA or something, right? There's a lot of times that students are talking to people that aren't necessarily like email or text message, something that's automated and we can get to electronically from some metric or another. So how would we add that? And how, even historically, like Matt was talking about, how historically are we able to pull that in order to find the true metrics of a student's engagement? I guess was more my question.
Yeah, so I think the most insightful data would come is if your advisor or your faculty would be willing to fill out a very quick but data-rich form that, again, it could be a QR code that just takes them to the form. They can fill out the student's name. If it causes a duplicate record, your internal staff can probably handle that on the back end. But you could also start engaging, like, oh, okay, this student was like a 4 out of 5. Like, they were asking all the right questions. They knew the institution. They obviously did their homework. Or like, oh, this was a 1 out of 5. Their parents drove them to campus, dropped them off, and said, I'll be back in an hour. So they're talking to faculty, or they're just going to an advisor just because they have to kill an hour. So these are kind of data points that, like, sure, your advisor, your faculty, maybe they could add an interaction in Slate if they're users, or if you're generating a public-facing way for them to add interactions. But really, there's going to be a lot of insights from that meeting that can drive something like the engagement score. That's going to be missed if it's just like, okay, on June 26th, student came to my class, we chatted for 12 seconds. Like, chances are you're not going to be pulling the actual raw text from the interaction on the student's timeline to drive your engagement score. But if it is a Slate form, or if it's a portal that the faculty have access to add like a pop-up, you get like embedding a form in a pop-up to just, here's 3 or 4 data points that can help capture the student's engagement, or capture the level of energy or demonstrated interest, whatever the student brought to that meeting. It's a bit more architecture, a bit more back-end work to build it, but you can capture a lot of really insightful information like that. Did that answer your question at all, William?
Oh, it did. And I think, like you said later, the different modeling and stuff like that will probably provide more insight.
Yeah,
So-
definitely
so
come back to the next few.
David, when we look at all this data and we're looking at crunching numbers, right? There has to be strategy that comes after the fact. Like the fact that we get this point. Can you give a little bit of nuggets about a nudge strategy that schools could take on after they use, this type of Excel inside of Slate? Like, why are they doing it, and what are the nudge strategies for this? I know that we might not have enough time, but I think it's a really important conversation for folks to realize is that it's not just doing what we did last year. It's identifying what we should do for next year based on what we did, with the data that's in front of us in terms of historical, current, and then future element. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, if you have 10,000 prospective students or 5,000 or 400, whatever it could be, you probably have more students in Slate than you can actively, in a very human-centered way, reach out to. So maybe you have your engagement score of, okay, everyone who's scoring an 80 or higher, we're going to give a phone call, or we're going to send a handwritten postcard, whatever your really high touch, high resource engagement tactics from your institution. Maybe it's doing the Slate print, whatever it is. You don't have the money, you don't have the bandwidth, you don't have the staff to offer that really white glove catered service to all of your prospective students. But the students here who are engaging with you very highly. So the student, probably not a whole lot that you're going to be able to do with a student to get them to apply or get them to enroll. Maybe there is. Maybe the student just entered your system, whatever it might be. But yeah, this is a historical record. We don't know why the student's in your system. You could start looking at this from like origin source. Maybe this was a college board name search name. Maybe this was, again, a student where the parent filled out an inquiry card for them or an RFI form off of Slate. And it's just like, they just don't care. So you don't need to call this person. This just is not going to be the high return on time and investment for your work. But
So
you're starting to see like maybe a 45, maybe we give them a call, maybe we give them a handwritten postcard, maybe we offer programming specifically to these students.
So David, we're at the bottom of the hour. We have 30 minutes left, and I'd like to really just reset the rooms for the folks that are coming, because we're actually getting more people as the hour progresses. I've been looking at the number of attendees. We're actually progressing. So there's a bunch of new people that weren't here early. So we're really here to have David go to his part 2 and using Excel to really create predictive scoring and driving it. One of the things that I noticed in that list of people that are in the audience, there's so many people from different places. So if you all would love to just put where you're from and the school, that would really be good for others to necessarily see. So in the comments to see that this is actually going to be used, whether you're a community college, whether you're an Ivy, whether you're a state, whether you're a private, like the concepts of what we're going to be talking about here and that we are talking about here impacts across the board. And I think that was a really important piece as we go. So I'm not sure if Gabrielle, you wanted to reset the room a little bit more, but I just thought that would be good because we have more people than when we started. So
I'd love to. So thanks for joining us. As you can see on the right-hand side, you'll see some comments going. This is a great place to drop in any questions you have, questions, comments. If you'd like to join, David and Matt on stage, you're more than welcome to. Just let me know because you don't have the ability to request to come up. You have to drop it in the chat, and then I can actually request you to come up. And the Excel sheet that David is working from is available for you to also have downloaded. So you'll see on the chat, there'll be a pin on top with the link, the info.beyondacademics/Slate workshop -5-29. Click on that. That'll bring you to a page. And then when you scroll down a little bit on the right bottom hand side, you'll see a place that you can click. I can also send it to you via email if that is not working for you. Just let me know.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Gabrielle. And thank you so much, William. Appreciated that conversation. And if you're not able to follow along with us or we ran out of time, that Excel document also has both what we're working on, but also kind of just a final snapshot of what we're building towards. So you can continue working on this even if we don't get a chance to finish this today. But yeah, so we're creating that automated engagement score based off of our scoring rubric. So 5 points per event attendance, 1 point for every time they email us, 10 points if they submit the FAFSA. And then we're getting this new holistic score that measures how engaged or what their demonstrated interest is. This is just a really extremely simple example of it for today's workshop. So we have that score. So we're going to bounce back to our PowerPoint for just 1 second. So now we have the scoring rubric. You're going to be tinkering with it a lot. You're going to continue working with what behaviors to include, how many points to give them. But that's where the validation is going to come in. So we're going to use, again, very light statistics. Don't need to know everything about it. Excel can run it for you on your behalf. And we're actually going to use some conditional formatting and some formulas so that it just tells you like, yes, this is a good variable to use or not. So we will hop back over to our Excel document. So this is the data workshop tab. This is where we're doing our scoring rubric, and it has our raw Slate data. But this is kind of the exciting Excel tab. Maybe exciting is not the word everyone would use for Excel, but so we're doing a few different things here. We're going to use what's called a Pearson correlation coefficient to see what is the relation, how strong is the relationship between our new automated engagement score and our outcome variables or our validation variables. So we have 3 of these variables that we have. So we have a staff evaluation of demonstrated interest. Some institutions may have that, some might not. But we're also looking on how many of these students applied and how many of these students were admitted. So we're looking at more kind of basic outcomes that if you're using Slate for your application, if you understand who is being admitted, you're doing your application review in Slate, available and accessible for you in Slate. So we have a few pieces here. So we have our formulas here. Again, you can use those as reference, but we're actually going to start typing through this so you have a better understanding of what we're doing. So we want to understand how strong the relationship is between our automated score and our manual evaluation. And this is just data that we already have in our Slate data set. So if we start doing, again, that equal sign, and we start typing in Pearson, which is just a statistic. We don't need to go into how to do statistics. Excel knows how to do all this in the back end. You just need to make sure you understand enough to point it at the right columns, don't have typos, but all of this is referencing that's working correctly. So again, we selected Pearson from that dropdown and gave us an opening parentheses. So you want to tell it, I want to look at these 2 data points and see how correlated they are. What is the relationship? So we want to choose our new automated score. So again, we can just click on that column, the P column, and that will have it select everything in that column. And then we're just going to add a comma to tell Excel, like, okay, this is one variable that we're using. And then also use the staff demonstrated interest variable. So again, we're just clicking on the C to have it select the entire column. And we can close parentheses. It'll be a little bit easier, again, if we add the anchors, so those $signs to the P's. So when we're moving our formula around, it knows to continue looking at the automated score. And then we can just hit enter. So it's going to give you a value between -1 and +1. The closer to 1, the stronger the relationship. The closer to 0, there's less relationship. So you can see this is very close to -1. So there's a high correlation between a staff evaluating engagement and our new engagement score that we're having Excel/Slate do. So that's good. We want those to be very similar, highly correlated variables. But if we look at like, okay, if a person scores very high in our engagement score, what percentage of them are applying? And about 40% are applying, or the relationship is that. So it's not as great of a predictor of if they apply or not, but it is a pretty solid predictor on if they're being admitted. So again, if it was a 1-to-1 relationship, as score goes up, the percentage or the ratio of people being admitted also goes up very in step. So we're having a pretty good spread. Could be better, could be worse. So then the next step is we have to tell Excel how many records do we have that we're actually doing this test on. So again, we can just tell Excel we want to do the equal sign to do a formula. And we just want to count the number of records. And we're going to use this count if. So we're going to give it a criteria. So we want to count the number of rows. We're going to go back over to the data workshop. And we're going to select that P column again. And how many rows in P is this greater than, or is it equal to? Well, let me just gotta do the greater than or equal to 0. And this is kind of, count ifs are kind of a weird. Sorry about that. So how many rows in P are greater than or equal to 0? And we don't have any missing data. So, but if you had missing data also in the staff, you'd have to write a more complicated formula. But how many rows are greater than or equal to 0? And we have 45 records in our test data set. That's just important to know, to tell us, like, is this a good variable or not? So for the t-test, again, this is going to be a more complicated formula. So this is definitely one, use these as references. So we'll go through it real quick just so you understand what's happening, but no pressure to actually follow along with it. So we want to know, essentially, does this relationship, given this number of students, what is the t-test on this? So we need to look at on a 0 to 1 scale. So we're going to use this ABS, which means an absolute value. Fancy way of saying just take the negative off of this. So instead of negative 0.81, just make it 0.81. So we're going to select that cell. And we're going to square root it. Again, don't necessarily need to follow along with what exactly this is doing. It's just, it's doing stuff. And then we're going to take the number of records we had, minus it by 2, which is our degrees of freedom. And then a 2-tailed test. Again, don't need to follow all of that, but just understand there's just a bit more, makes it a bit more conservative. And I think I added an extra parentheses here. Oh. Didn't finish it.
So David, this, some of these formulas, of course, you know this really well, right? So how does folks that are just learning this, is it leveraging your Excel and then cut and copying it into their own and creating their own version of this? Or is there another strategy that you would give them? How did you pick this up? How did you understand, how to use an Excel to pull this data? Because I think it's great, but how do you do it when you don't know it? And today I use ChatGPT for a lot of my formulas, but how did you learn this, or how does the folks that do it learn it?
I learned a lot of this in grad school. I have a very statistics heavy grad school background. I worked in institutional research for a while. So doing a lot of this kind of statistics in Excel, I've just learned on the job. I would say if you are interested in this stuff, there's a lot of great resources. Like Matt said, I'm sure ChatGPT could also both give you an understanding of what's going on, but could also write the formula for you. Let me just create that formula real quick.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we need to even have a deeper dive in some of the concepts of this, right? And if people would be open to doing that kind of stuff, right? So.
Yeah, and definitely there will be some deeper dive when we get into predictive modeling. Our last workshop is on binary logistic regression, which, again, trying to get through that in an hour. We're going to have a lot of content, and it'll be not the most in-depth statistical lecture ever. But yeah, there's lots of resources to learn stuff like this. I'm happy to be a resource. The Excel document that we have available on the website for you to download, again, already has all these formulas in them. And maybe I think we could do is we can annotate this a bit more with some comments and then re-put that on the website just so that you understand a bit better what's happening as we're writing these formulas. Yeah, I think that's a great thing. Yeah, I'll definitely work on a more annotated version of this document that we can give out to folks.
Yeah, that would be just helpful for the community, right? So there is another question, David, from Pomoa.
Yeah.
Can you explain why we should run statistics on a data instead of adding up the points for the score. And Palmora,
Yeah.
if you want to join us, you're welcome to join us on stage too.
Yeah, so definitely, we're just doing the statistics is just to compare our automated score with our outcome variables. So yeah, you could kind of try to eyeball of like, oh yeah, this person has, let me go back to my data. This person has a 27 and this person has a 3 on their staff evaluation. This person has a 0, this person has a 5. So you can kind of start eyeballing like, okay, there is a relationship, but with the number of variables you're going to be using, because we're all, we don't do it today, but in like my Excel document, I do this kind of relationship testing with each of my behaviors as well. So to be able to have Excel and you can just kind of just copy and paste to this for each of your behaviors, having Excel just aggregating the comparison and being able to see like, oh yes, this is a statistically significant relationship. And this is, according to my rule of thumb, this is a very strong relationship versus a weak relationship. So we're able to very much at a glance use these statistics. And again, you don't need to know all the nitty-gritty details about statistics. Excel is running this for you. As long as you can kind of make sure you're not getting typos or using this as a guide as to what you're doing, you're able to very much so at a glance. We're going to add some conditional formatting. So this will be green versus red to make sure that you're able to at a glance see like, yes, this is a good variable to use. And I know we're quickly running out of time, so I think we might have to skip some stuff. But we're also going to be looking at, for each of our values and our behaviors, what is the average automated score? What is the average staff demonstrated interest? What is, and these are essentially percentages. So when someone scores a 1 point on email sent by student, 71% of them are applying, but 0% of them are admitting. So yeah, that's a pretty giant indicator of like how your students are interacting with your institution. You don't admit anyone unless they have sent 2 emails to you. And maybe that is because they're sending documents into your institution. Maybe they're just asking questions, and people who just don't care enough to send emails, they're not the students that you're looking to admit. So this provides so much insight even at this level of to how your students are engaging with your institution beyond just having an automated engagement score. So I would just say that there's a lot of pieces to this tool that will help provide insight and strategy to how you want to engage with your students. But yeah, the statistics is just to make it a little bit easier to, at a glance, see how good how quote unquote good the variables are at. I wouldn't want to say predicting because we'll get into predictive modeling later, but how correlated these behaviors are with your outcomes. Hey man, I think you're on mute.
You know, the fact that you have this data, I go back to strategy, right? I can have a tool, the tool works great, I have numbers. I'm always trying to figure out, how do I build this with the strategy to nudge, engage, communicate, serve? Is there an exercise before this all happens, before we do all of this stuff on Excel, that we design a strategy? And is that a common instance in the way that Slate is working, or is that something that we have to build a really thoughtful strategy around it that leverages this Excel spreadsheet? Because you just talked about there's 2 emails that came or 3 emails that came, but there's some thought that you thought about, right? How does campuses, and remember, in our audience, we have community colleges, Ivy, State, all these schools, right? They're all different. Their strategies are different. How do we build this Excel spreadsheet in a way for each one of them?
Yeah, and I think, like Matt is saying, this is a tool to help you leverage and build your way into strategy. So there's also some pieces that we're going to cover next month on how to facilitate these conversations with your admission staff, or again, if you're in one of the other offices, to provide insights from their institutional knowledge to give you the strategy piece as well, or to help weigh in on the strategy on how we can use this data that you're floating to the surface in a strategic way, whether that's we want to send emails, like automatic emails or manual emails that are really tailored to the student in ways that are able to help foster that relationship. And again, I want to provide a very distinct separation between what we're going to be doing with engagement scoring and what we're going to be doing later with predictive modeling. Like Robbie says, there's definitely a difference between Excel and running ANOVAs. So this is kind of that lower hanging fruit on the path to doing predictive modeling. But this is in of itself a great tool that allows you to have the insights to build a strategy around your recruitment and your interactions with your students. But it is a time-consuming process, because it is not just, oh, I have this Excel document. Now it'll tell me what emails to send, or it'll tell me who to phone call. But it is going to provide you with information on how your students are engaging with you and what their outcomes actually are. So be prepared for this to be a slightly more time-consuming process for it to actually make an impact on what your institution is doing. Because again, if you have a shiny tool, you have data that could provide strategy and insights. If you're not getting your buy-in from your leadership, or if you're not getting to actually move the needle on what your institution is doing with your students, a shiny tool is just going to start gathering rust in the tool shed. So being able to have time allotted to develop a strategy around this data and to develop what your institution is going to be doing differently or experimenting with every year to become better, to become more future ready, is going to be a really important element of this. So you can come to the workshop to do fancy Excel stuff, but again, that is not in and of itself going to translate to a strategic move by your institution to utilizing this data to create a better student journey, to help provide a path for students to be more successful at your institution. It is just a way to help guide that strategic plan development. Hopefully that answered some questions. So we're just going to write a couple more quick formulas. I think we're going to probably skip the bonuses section though, but we'll talk more about bonuses next month's workshop. So we're going to just do another formula. This is just a pre-built formula Excel already has. It's the t-test distribution. So again, fancy words for just saying, is the relationship you're finding here, is this just kind of due to chance probably? Or is this a finding that you can pretty reliably count on as being a significant contributor or significantly correlated with your engagement? So we're going to look at that t-distribution. So again, we're just going to click on the actual t-test. And we're going to do a comma and opening parentheses. So again, we just need to get our degree of freedom. And this is the two-tail test. I was getting ahead of myself live on a workshop. I apologize. So this is a scientific notation because this is a really strong relationship. So this just has a lot of zeros. You can tell by the kind of exponential scientific notation here. So what we actually want to know is some solid rule of thumbs here is if this value is less than 0.05 or 0.01 or 0.001, that is considered a statistically significant relationship. So again, you can see applied, it meets that 0.05 criteria. It meets that 0.01 criteria. It doesn't quite meet the 0.001 criteria. Most people are probably just going to use a 0.05 though. So we just want to tell Excel if this value, so this p-value, is greater than 0.05, then just say yes. This is statistically significant. If it's not, so if that criteria is not true, so if this is less than 0.05, then just tell me no. Oh, yeah, there you go. And actually, it's greater than. I actually want to do less than. I apologize. Less than 0.05. So if we did, maybe we had a very small sample size. So we had only 4 people. A lot of what's driving this p-value, and if it's statistically significant, is how strong or how close to -1 or +1 this is, but also how big this number is. So if you had 50,000 students, but you only had maybe a 0.4 effect size, that's still statistically significant. 0.2, still statistically significant. 0.1, still statistically significant. So if either of these values is very, very strong, you're probably going to get a statistically significant value. Just how the p-values work. So you not only want to know if it's statistically significant, it's like this is a very weak effect, but our actual population that we're working on is huge. So you actually want to also know how strong this correlation coefficient is. So we're going to write another rule of thumb. So we just want to, this one again is going to be a little bit more longer. So again, we want to do an if criteria. So like we want Excel to evaluate a situation and then give us a value. So if our correlation coefficient, or again, we want to do if the absolute value is. So with ABS, so that's the absolute. So we're going to remove the negative. If that correlation coefficient is, say, greater than or equals to 0.75, then I held down my shift, so I apologize. So if it's greater than or equal to 0.75, then just say it's a very strong. And if that's false, we're actually going to run another if statement. So we can just copy that. So we're going to highlight and copy it. So if it's not greater than 0.75, but if it is greater than maybe 0.5, then we'll just say it's strong.
Hey, David, while you're doing the coding of this, there is a question from William that basically is asking, what is the realistic lift of this of the spreadsheet? Using your template, is it a number of hours? Can you give a number of hours for data point, email? Like people are wondering, like, okay, if I were to take this template that you're doing, how complex is it for them to get it running on their campus?
Oh, that is a great question, William. Just so many great questions today. That's going to be kind of hard because if you are doing a lot of the data exploration in Excel, a lot of the time difference is going to be like, I'm extremely proficient in Excel. I've been working in Excel for over a decade. I can do it pretty quickly. If you've never opened up a spreadsheet before, it's going to take much longer to start manipulating the data. And again, if you have a deep understanding of your data and of how relation databases work and how students are able to engage with your institution, again, having that institutional knowledge of what forms do you offer, what kinds of events do you offer, that's also going to help speed up what variables to pull out of Slate. Again, if you're very strong in configurable joins, probably not going to take you that long to build the exports. But if you're still in the local or Slate template library and you haven't opened configurable joins up, that's a huge barrier to something like this. It's just learning configurable joins, or it's just learning Excel, or it's just learning how students can engage with your institution. So it's really hard to try to gauge what a realistic time frame is, because as with a lot of Slate projects, there's just these hurdles of like, oh, okay, I need to learn how to do configurable joins, or like, hey, ping tracking pixel to our website so we can start collecting ping data. So I apologize that I don't have a great answer for how long this is going to take, and especially now.
Well, yeah, and I think and we only have 2 minutes left, so I want to make sure we're going to wrap up so that people have and people are free to join, stay afterwards. But one of the things that I know that is when you start with a little bit of something and someone can walk you through the logic of that, you can pick that up, right? Like, I'm a functional former registrar, right? I never coded in my life, but the fact that I could see some of the context behind it, the formulas behind it, the logic behind it. Is there a way for us to build a community that comes together to build these things and then allows for other people to go do it? So maybe the community colleges are working together because their design would be different than the state schools who go at, their admission cycles are different. Is there a little bit of strategy in terms of peer-to-peer collaboration on building this? Is that part of of what is within the admissions community at this time, David?
Yeah, I definitely think we could do that. I think as long as there is a place for those voices to be heard, for those conversations to be happening. Maybe one community college has started using Inbox and they love it, but maybe a peer institution that's having that conversation in that Zoom room, in space, whatever it is, says like, oh, we didn't realize how valuable of a data point that is. Can you help us, or can you provide some advice or guidance on how to get up and going in Inbox? That's one of the things I love about the Slate community so much, is kind of that ability for everyone to work together. And you're not, even if you are competitors, the amount of sharing and the thought leadership that goes into collaborating is so wonderful. So yeah, I would love if maybe we can open up some office hours this year as we're going through this journey of building engagement scores, building predictive modeling, just to help facilitate those conversations from that peer-to-peer side.
So we're at the top of the hour. William, get off of, put your camera on. I think we could probably live through a little bit of voice breakage while we close up. But I want to, thank everyone for joining us. Is there anything, William, that you want to close this session with? We are going to have part 3. Maybe give a little bit of what part 3 is going to look like. I see that Art has awarded William the most engaged participant. So we should give out some awards like this. I think Art has come up with an idea. And I think Gabrielle is looking at, giving out some Beehive gifts and stuff as we go. So let's close it out with what's up in the future. What do you want to finish this session with? How do we get to the next session, and a little bit of that. And we'd love feedback from our audience of what you feel was valuable here, how we can help you in engaging a better community and then driving conversations in a lot of ways. David, I'll let you close it out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. I apologize, my camera is off. I have, I think, just the world's worst Wi-Fi today, so it was causing some audio issues earlier. So yeah, I'm happy to stay on. We can continue working on the Excel document, or we can chat about other, like last month's workshop or what's coming up down the line. But next month, we're going to be using tools like Slate Forms, Deliver, and portals to help formulate those conversations with our Slate admission staff so they can help provide that insight and the strategy to use these tools. But we're also going to be talking about how to use this engagement score in Slate. We're going to be working with some translation codes to make this easier for staff to use. We're going to show some examples of how to use it as a filter to drive our automated communications, and conditional logic to drive certain text in our existing communications that we know our people are highly engaged in an event, or they're highly engaged with our communications, and how that can affect our strategy on outreach. So that's next month, last Wednesday of the month. I think that might be July 30th. But I am not 100. I probably should have looked up on a calendar before I said that.
We'll do that. So let's do this. Let's close this out. Yeah. Let's close this out, and then we'll stay on and we'll do a mingle. But I want to thank everyone who joined the Beehive, the Slate session around engagement, predictive scoring, and Excel. So thank you, everyone. We'll hope to see you in the next session, and let us know if you like us to add any more topics or if you have questions. So thanks so much. All right. That's good enough for us. We will cut that and start this. So this rest of it won't be as recorded on the live stream, but
it's still showing as live, isn't it? Oh no, it's not.
It is live, but if I end the stream, it'll go. So we'll go and edit it that way. So let's see if anyone has any other last thoughts, and if not, then we'll close it out, Gabrielle, and then we'll go from there.
So Paloma has a question, it looks like, about any features from Slate Summit. That was last week, their big annual conference. And there are some fun features. Instead of having to re-download your Slate query every time, you can actually now create a live connection between your Excel document and that Slate query. So you can just hit basically refresh on Excel, and it will update all of your Excel data with what's currently live in Slate, which I think is a lot of fun. It's also going to make building your Slate queries a lot faster once we can start copying our sub-query exports and adding them to filters and stuff like that, that's going to make it much faster to build this process.
David, only 2 people dropped. So if you want to continue to finish up your Excel, you can,
Sure.
And we'll just continue to record it so that others that have to leave, maybe we'll leave it as recorded. So do you want to just keep going? There's 35 people still continuing to watch.
Yeah, I'll try to kind of speed through the rest of it so we don't take up too much of everyone's time. So if we can move my presented screen back to the
We'll do.
screen maybe. And thank you so much, Robbie. Oh yeah, and Robbie just also added a question. I think there will be a lot of really interesting work that AI can do with this, whether it's helping you select your behaviors or if it's more integrated machine learning algorithms for that predictive modeling piece when we get to that. I think that there is going to be a lot of really interesting stuff that we can do with AI, and also providing that strategic piece of like, oh, you need 30 more students, let's send out 4 more emails, host 2 more events, and next year buy these names instead to hit your goals. So I think there's a lot of really interesting work that the AI can do both on the structural building it side and also the strategy side. So definitely very, very excited about that. But yeah, so back to Excel. So we added some conditional formatting to just say, if this is a yes, then highlight it green. So we can still see, though, if this is back to being a small population size, this is automatically going to tell us no. And it's no longer going to meet the criteria to be green. So again, this just allows you to more easily at a glance see, okay, this is a good variable in relationship to staff demonstrated interest or not, and on that outcome of if they applied, and without the outcome of being if they admitted. And I won't waste any more time doing this piece, but again, what we're doing is essentially heat mapping how strong the relationship is. So you can see in the manage roles, so if it's a not, I'm giving it a red formatting. If it's very strong, dark green. If it's kind of strong, light green. Moderate is blue. Weak is that orangish color. So again, when you have this chunk for every behavior, and maybe you have 75 behaviors, you're just kind of workshopping to put into your engagement score, not having to like go into this level of detail to understand your relationship between these variables, huge help. Definitely is going to streamline your evaluation of behaviors. And again, because we are able to change on a fly how many points we're assigning here. So maybe we're giving this 30 points per behavior now. This is going to update the numbers that you have here. And we can just make these active again. So we're able to continue to tinker with our scoring rubric, and everything is just automatically being updated on this side. So we can go back to this being 5 points, and that'll drop it back to that 0.81. So like I said earlier, one of the things that I find really helpful is seeing is what is the average of our outcome validation variables and our automated score at each given value of our behaviors. So what we're going to do is, again, we'll just build these formulas real quick so you understand what's going on. So I want to get all the possible scores. So we can just start with a 0. And then in the next cell down, we're just going to do an equal sign. We can reference that cell above us, that A13 plus 1. And our automated score goes up in increments of 1. So this is a way for us to just see, like, at every value, what is the average staff demonstrated interest. So we'll do another equal sign to activate a formula. We're going to do an if error. And this is just, it's kind of like a null if in Slate. So if there's a mathematical error, then don't just error out like it does over here. I want you to just give me a different value. And this is going to be really important because every time there's not a error out, because an average is just dividing. So you'll divide by 0. So then we're going to do an average ifs. So again, we're going to get the average according to which rows meet our criteria. So we're going to go over to our data workshop tab, and we're going to select, we want the average staff demonstrated interest score when our automated score And commas just separate our different data points. So when our automated score equals this value, and we can add a couple anchors again, so the dollar signs allow us to drag our formulas and make sure that we're still pointing to the cells that we want. So we'll leave the C by itself, but we'll add dollar signs to the P and the A. Oh, and we actually have our error if statement as well. So if for some reason this math errors out, then just give me a dash. We're doing quotation marks so it knows it's a string. And we can drag this variable down. We're just left clicking the little green box. And we can see as our automated score goes up, our staff evaluation goes down. And we can see from our statistics up here, it's because there's a negative relationship. So when staff are evaluating in Slate, a 5 is bad, a 1 is best. So as this score goes up, we want to see this score go down. And generally speaking, we are seeing that. So we're seeing some 5s, 4s, 4.7s when they're scoring low on our score. But as we're getting a higher score here, we're seeing 2s, 3s, 1s. So this is why this value is so close to -1, because there's a high relationship. As this goes up, this goes down, which is what we want to see. Because an automated version of the score should be pretty similar to the manual evaluation of the score. And because we have our anchors in this formula, so we're going to continue looking at what is the average of this column when our automated score equals that. We can actually just drag this over, and we can see now we're looking for the average of column D, which is applied, when our automated score continues to be that. So we can just drag this over again. And we can double left click that little green box in the bottom right hand side of the cell. And these are essentially going to be percentages. So, because it's just a yes is a 1 and no equals a 0. So when you aggregate those, it's just what percentage. So we're seeing, even at these lower scores, a pretty fair amount of people are applying. We definitely, as we get higher, a higher percentage of them are applying. So we're not seeing the 33%, we're not seeing the 67%, we're seeing a lot of 100% as we get higher. We're seeing a stronger relationship with admitted. We're seeing a lot of, okay, if no one who scored a 0 was admitted, but they also never applied. But even though 67% of the people who scored a 5 applied, none of them were admitted. So again, we're seeing not great outcomes for students who are not engaged with our institution. Again, understandable. If you're not going to events, you're not sending emails, you're not on the website, you're not engaging with an institution, you might not be as interested. So you're less likely to apply, you're less likely to be admitted. So we're seeing a pretty strong relationship on the admitted, which again is 0.67 of a correlation coefficient. So it's not as strong as this one, but it's stronger than applied. So we're seeing like, okay, this looks like this automated score is correlated overall. And I'm liking kind of at this individual level, understanding low engagement, still getting some applications, not really admitting anyone. So we can start looking at our institutional policy and practices to see what is happening here. Do we just not know enough about the student to admit them? Are they just not good fit? What is that? What's that piece that's driving this outcome with low engagement? And I'm also going to want to do this for each of our individual behaviors. So event attendance, emails sent by student, FAFSA being submitted. So again, we're just going to do a 0 on that first because it's 0 points. This one's going to be a little bit more complicated. We're going to, again, do that equal sign. We're going to reference that 0. And instead of plussing it by 1 this time, we actually want to plus it by the number of points that we're seeing. So no one's ever going to get 2 points for attending an event because they go to one event, they get 5 points, and then it's 10 points. So we want this to raise incrementally with the number of points. And I think Excel is doing something a little funny there. So we're going to go back to here. And again, we're just So when we drag the formula down, it's still looking at that 5 points. And again, this makes it dynamic. So if we decide like, okay, no, 5 points, way too much. We only want to give 2 points for every event. Again, the scoring rubric changes, the automated score changes, and this validation row also changes because it's referencing this number of points. So everything is relational to itself. So when you update one spot, updates the entire Excel document. So again, we want to look at if error, average ifs, and then again, this is the same formula that we were doing earlier. But we want to see what is the average automated score when our event attendance points equals 0. And then if there is a mathematical error, we'll just get a dash. We can drag that formula down. So we're seeing like even if someone does not attend an event, their average automated score is still an 8. So even if they don't attend an event, they're still engaging with our institution. They're still sending us emails. They may still be submitting the FAFSA. So we're actually seeing a slightly lower overall score for people who attend one event. So maybe there's a subset of population that attend to one event and they do nothing else, or they do very little else. So again, at the strategy piece, we can start looking at, so why are people coming to our institution and doing very little else with our campus? Are we not sending them a followed up email communication to prompt them with a good call to action? Or like, okay, you went to our campus, come check out the portal, or come have an interview with us. What can we do to help foster the relationship with this group that is not engaging with our campus? Like they came to campus, they did an event, but they're just not doing anything else. So where can we engage with the student to help foster a successful relationship or a successful journey with our institution? And we can just, we'll do some additional $signs to anchor our references. And we can just drag this formula over. So now we'll see though, when we drag that formula over, it went to column Q. We don't want it to be Q. We want it to actually reference column C. So we can manually update that, or we can just type in, instead of Q, we just want column C. And then we can continue dragging that over, because the next column in our data correlates with our headers. And that's not helpful. So again, we can convert these to percentages because that's essentially what it is. What percentage of these students are applying? What percentages are being admitted? So again, we're actually seeing a very high application rate, but we're seeing a very low percentage of these. I attended one event, didn't do much else, very low admission rate. Whereas the people who aren't attending events, low application rate, but we admitted every single person that engaged with us highly but did not come to an event. That can help start understanding and planning for your application review process. Like, oh, okay, these students, we love these students. These are the perfect students for our institution. So you can start understanding and you start digging into your data to understand the student population, what it is that is resonating both the institution for them, and what about this student are we loving so much that we're admitting every single student that applies. They're not coming to a campus event. Yes.
Are there tricks like that? Are there like common attributes that, can be shared among the peers to say, hey, this is a normal, or is it very unique to each school?
I definitely think that there are kind of what is considered high level, like this is a good marker for engagement, but there are other pieces that are going to be a little bit harder to quantify. Okay. But like a lot of people like to rely on like, okay, if you submit the FAFSA, you're a pretty interested student, or you're coming to campus, or like if we get them to come visit campus, they'll enroll.
Got it.
So some of this has a basis of truth. Sometimes maybe it's a little exaggerated, but as you're starting to look at the outcomes of these students and how they're being evaluated, what it is that's happening on their student journey, you're going to be able to start getting a lot of insights that aren't just these kind of oh, the standard rule of thumb is if we get them to campus, they'll come. Or maybe that's not true. Again, this person came to campus, good application rate. Not very many of them were admitted. Maybe they didn't yield very well. So you're able to get beyond that surface level of, okay, events, FAFSA, all of that. And you're actually able to start seeing a student is making with us is because they're doing this or they're whatever it might be. And again, that predictive modeling piece is also going to be very helpful because you're seeing a little bit more clearly what the relationship is.
Yeah. So David, we're already 20 minutes past. So
Okay.
I think the best thing is anyone that wants to continue to engage with David, I think doing it in a one-on-one would be really good, David. But I'd love to just close out and stop the stream, and then would love to invite everyone to join us for the next one, part 3. So there you go. We got to see David too. So.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to chat, happy to continue chatting. But I think we covered most of the Excel stuff. Sorry that we went so long, but I think there was also a lot of helpful conversation that we were having during the session as well.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, David. We'll see everyone in part 3.
Thank you so much for joining us. See you next month.